Gauteng. It goes on to say the ANC apologizes for electing former President Jacob Zuma as ANC head and subsequently the President of South Africa. Mavuso Msimang joins me now to unpack this and more. To be a part of this conversation, you can, of course, send your questions and comments for him to 072-110-5584. You can tweet us tonight at Newzroom 405. Mavuso Msimang, good evening and thank you very much for your time.
Good evening, Thabo. Good evening to your viewers. Thanks for the invitation.
If we look at how the ANC had behaved, for example, in the past, whenever there were failings in government or in cabinet and the decisions taken by a cabinet, when the ANC would be questioned, for example, on the failures of SAA, the failures of PRASA, or the failures particularly in how police are handling the vandalization of trains, right? You would hear the ministers say, well, the nation and South Africa should take collective responsibility, but also the ANC taking collective responsibility. This time around, there seems to be no keenness in the ANC to spread the blame equally amongst itself for what happens, but they would rather stick this on instigators, and it's seemingly not biting at this particular point.
Yeah, actually what I sought to address was the question of the internal disagreements within the ANC. It's popularly known as factions, in which one group persistently said if Jacob Zuma is going to be arrested, if he's arrested, then there will be trouble. And trouble happened. But I'm really saying if there hadn't been these internal tussles within the African National Congress, if we had resolved our problems going back many years, we would have been able to contain a situation which just suddenly escalated outside of everybody's wildest expectations. So yes, the president himself has at a certain time said, you know, South Africa, the ANC is guilty, he said, of corruption. If the ANC didn't have internal problems, the problems that occurred on the 8th of July would not have been. That's really the position.
Yeah. Is the ANC perturbed at all by the destruction that is happening in society, or are they more concerned with who wins this political fight? And I suppose society will have to pay the price in the interim while they continue with this war between the factions.
Well, I cannot speak officially for the African National Congress. I actually said the apology that I wish to offer, together with some of my colleagues. We didn't sit to plan these things. It's really unauthorized. But we are saying people with an interest in this organization who spent our living years in the organization do feel that when things like this happen, the organization ought to come to the public and say, we failed to sort out our problems, and this spilled out to the public. So are they concerned? I would hope every sensible person would be concerned by what happened after starting in on July 8th. I hope people are. I haven't seen a statement that says sorry, otherwise would really have said sorry to the nation. But I haven't seen such a statement. I honestly think people are concerned about this, but the important thing is to find solutions. How do we move from here? We've messed things up big time. But one of the things that we can do is to identify among ourselves who is responsible for this and make sure that they do not continue to do that in the future. If people have instigated this violence, and it is instigated, there's no doubt in my mind or anybody else's mind who thinks soberly, that somebody says, dare you arrest Jacob Zuma, and there will be trouble. And indeed, the very morning after he's been arrested, the trouble begins. Yeah. So clearly we are using the nation, we're holding it to ransom. And we think that those in the ANC who are not concerned about whether Zuma, who believe actually that Zuma should have been arrested for the offenses that he was charged for. So you have a situation in which people are saying, because some of the people in the ANC have kind of accepted that Zuma will be arrested, we will fix them by starting the trouble that has affected the nation. But it's an internal problem by people who call upon Cyril Ramaphosa. Many messages have been going out. Ramaphosa will stop being a president. We need a conference to happen. Otherwise, here is a list of things that must be done. Nationalize the bank, do this. And these are the messages that have accompanied this chaos. Yeah. They are all internal messages, and the consequences, if they are not fulfilled, these demands, is that the nation will suffer in the manner that it did.
Where are the counter-internal messages? Where are the counter-internal voices? Where are those members who will come up and then rise publicly refusing to be a part of this and saying we support the work that the current administration is doing?
We really don't even have to have persons individually coming out and talking in public. The authority in the African National Congress is within what is called the National Executive Committee. That's the highest decision-making body in between conferences, as we're always told. Now, when ructions of this nature take place, it is for them to put forward a clear line. You don't want to see happen what happened when a delegation of, I think, 10 people was sent to Nkandla to stabilize the situation. What does it mean when you send a mixed bag of people, some of whom are very sympathetic to the people responsible for the problem, and you think they're going to calm the situation? We saw one of the people getting on top of a stage there, and saying, hey, Zuma, wonderful human being and all of that. Well, this is politics at a time when the man is supposed to go to jail for legal reasons. So really, this is all this playing with fire, playing it out in the public, that has caused the problem to escalate to the extent that it did. I hear people talk about underlying causes. There's no doubt about that. I mean, there's poverty. You wouldn't have seen people looting in the manner that they did, especially the poor were taking food. All of that is not mutually exclusive to the statement that what actually ignited this was a failure by, I don't know. I mean, politics can't interfere with legal processes. Did they expect somebody to go and tell the judges to change their decision and not arrest Zuma? But it looks as if this is the kind of demand. We're being told that the judiciary is part of an extension of an ANC faction. Yeah. All fictitious, irresponsible talk and being played out in public. I remember now, your question was, what should the other people, those who are not in agreement with this nonsense that I'm describing that resulted in this thing, ought to put their foot down and say, you cannot do this. I think some of these offenses are actually punishable by some form of punishment. Yeah. I mean, whether it's suspensions or what have you. Yeah.
You speak of the ANC having given the group called the MKMVA carte blanche to be a public nuisance instead of concentrating on what it is established to do, namely to help desperately poor military veterans who participated in the liberation struggle. Is it too late now for the ANC to want to rein in the MKMVA?
I know it's not too late at all. In fact, they have disbanded the MKMVA. Too late, many years
well,
too
they
late.
They believe the NEC cannot do that because they have their own autonomy. They're an independent structure that cannot be told by the mother body to disband.
Yes, I don't want to go into those legal niceties which mean nothing. If you're an organization with authority, it would certainly deal with these people. They've banned them. As far as I'm concerned, they've been dissolved. and they ought to take their orders from there. They can go to court and find out whether the ANC had the right to disband them or not. But, you know, they said all these years, chanting slogans in support of an ANC faction in this case. They said at Luthuli House, I don't think they paid a cent of rent, and yet they are not part of the regular structures of the ANC, such as, for instance, the Women's League, Youth League, and the Veterans League. This is just a group that has parked there and participates in doing things that have nothing to do with their mandate of assisting very desperately poor veterans. Some of the people who actually were in the bush fighting for the liberation of this country, that's where the focus should be. But you've seen these people playing very much into the political space and also declaring that if Zuma is arrested, I don't know what's going to happen. Is the ANC ought to act with firmness and deal with this group if they are not accepting the dissolution. The ANC should deal with that, but officially, these people don't exist now. And by the way, for the longest time, and this is what gave them this feeling that they could do what they like, they were okay as long as Jacob Zuma was president, because they stated quite upfront that they supported him. So where on earth have you ever seen an organization that is supposed to be promoting the welfare of people getting into battles of supporting individual leaders? And of course, maybe if everybody was afraid of challenging President Zuma, but that's really sad in itself. When you sit at that level of governance, you are all equal, and the president is merely the first among equals. And so you ought to stand up and say what's wrong and say what is and condemn it and act to move it aside. I do think there have been developments recently which should strengthen the hand of the people who would like to see order in the ANC prevail.
Mavuso, let's take a break. We'll come back and interrogate this a little bit further. ANC veteran Mavuso Msimang with us tonight here on In Focus. Continue then with your reporting in conversation tonight with the ANC veteran Mavuso Msimang, who penned an unofficial letter alongside other members to say the ANC owes the country an unreserved apology for the looting and the mayhem and the destruction the country saw recently due to the unrest caused by instigators who were calling for the release of former President Jacob Zuma. Before the break, Mavuso Msimang, I was asking the question, should then therefore the ANC collectively, including the President, take full responsibility for the failings of the leadership, right, who are failing to, one, agree on what to call what happened, two, on whether or not an intelligence report was issued. But also we have seen clearly some leadership within the various municipalities saying, in my own personal capacity, I think the arrest of former President Jacob Zuma is wrong, and that's my view, and I have a right in the Constitution to express that view.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I would absolutely not hesitate to say we do owe the nation an apology, we ANC. That means everybody who is ANC, particularly the leadership who are responsible for all these actions. I think they do owe the nation that. If the president went as far as saying that the ANC was corrupt in the past, so what? Has that been curbed? I mean, so whether they say that or not, really, it's outside my control. The issue of whether Jacob Zuma should have gone to jail or not should not at all come into force. It really is totally irrelevant. There are no special rules for people who contributed to the struggle or who are old like myself. If you are deemed to have broken the law, it doesn't matter what seat you occupy in government in the country. Anything. The law must take its course. The sooner we learn that as a nation, the better our future shall be. So an individual expressing their private opinion that they don't think Zuma should have been arrested, I mean, they are fully entitled to do that, but that should not influence the course of the process of implementing laws. That really is the position. You're not going to start saying that because Mavuso is going to be 80 very soon, we must be very careful, let's not put him into. Mavuso should not do things that land him in jail. Mavuso has to be respectful of the Constitution, even if he doesn't think, I just want to say very quickly, Jacob Zuma and his lawyers say Zuma should have, Zondo should have recused himself. Do you know that throughout the legal system, all the time, judges are asked to recuse themselves, and they have the right to consider the matter, hopefully based on valid thinking and so on, and they recuse themselves or not. And when they decide not to, the case goes forward. So there should be no exceptions here simply because the person who wanted the recusal, because it happens to be a Mfumbesi of Zondo, it really does not make any sense.
Yeah. But there is a thinking that says the ANC itself allowed that kind of behavior to prevail that led to people, even, I suppose, former President Jacob Zuma himself, to believe that the ANC loves him and the ANC will never turn its back on him, and he will never see a day when he is put in jail. And this has been, of course, a behavior and an attitude up until this point, and it's quite bizarre that today the ANC would so just say nothing when Zuma goes to jail.
It's really absolutely regrettable. It's actually, what's the word? I know when, for instance, I think it was the DA, at least when, after the Constitutional Court said Zuma had failed to discharge his mandate, when they said he had disrespected the Constitution and so on. The obvious thing to do then would have been to remove Zuma as president. And it could have been done very nicely. You didn't have to wait for the DA to move a motion. If there was good leadership, they would have called Zuma aside and said, in light of that decision by the Constitutional Court, I think the best thing is that we don't want to take you through what may be a humiliating process of parliament. Just step down, just as was done with Thabo Mbeki when he was asked to do that, not for any justifiable reasons, as far as I'm concerned. He being a very disciplined and respectful person, member of the ANC, decided to step down. Yes, I agree with you, Thabo. When Gwede was Secretary General, he said, no, they couldn't do that. They couldn't honor, actually, execute the decision of the Constitutional Court, because that's what they didn't do by removing Zuma, because that would cause chaos. It would break up the ANC. Once you get to a point where anybody, even a Mandela, can err and you can't take action against them because it will destroy the organization, you must know that that organization is dead. I don't think this organization is dead. It's the people who have been leading it, who behave in a manner that is totally unacceptable, who prevented these actions. So we are now expected to think that they are untouchables in this organization. They shouldn't be. They aren't. But if that has been cultivated over time, there must come a time when the organization must do the right thing and treat everybody respectfully but firmly, similarly.
There's someone who could be watching us tonight saying, well, we respect about Mavuso Msimang as an ANC veteran, but has actually set to think about what the substantive cost will be for the ANC to take collective responsibility for the mess that took place in the country recently.
I don't think anybody would expect the ANC to pay, and that's really not the import of the message. It's just that we should be humble enough to say we failed to keep our house in order and we allowed the rubbish to spill out and affect the public negatively. We are responsible for that. If we didn't have factional fights, that's for Christ's sake, if we didn't have factional fights, we would not have had what happened in July. And to pretend that this is a consequence of people protesting because Zuma is so popular. He may be very popular, but I'm saying what happened on that day had nothing to do with the public reaction to his arrest.
Is it fair that organs of civil society and ordinary citizens like myself are now expected to rebuild this situation after a mess that we clearly were not a part of?
I'm afraid a lot of things need to be done quite seriously. I don't think many people would believe that the ANC would even have the ability to make good of the damage, some of it collateral, of course, or an escalation of what started as a sabotage operation. You know, in normal democracies where people have not had a history of apartheid and all of that, the ANC is an institution, by the way. It's a brand that reaches out to all parts of the country, rural areas, in urban areas. Too many people have sacrificed to bring us to where we are. And we always say Mandela Sisulu and all of that. In many families, people have made tremendous commitments under the banner of the ANC for the liberation of this country and hopefully for good governance in this country. So if people who have been put at the helm to run the organization don't recognize that there is something seriously wrong with us, the electors, how did they get there? But I mean, it's a topic that really ought to be discussed. You know, we dropped our guard. I think you read something about even the election of Jacob Zuma. I'm telling you, if after the Kwezi episode, which had happened 2 years earlier, where the ANC was so thoroughly disgraced because its president had a liaison with a person who was a daughter of a colleague who has since died, and this person ends up being jeered by members of the ANC, the Women's League, even worse, Nochal, as they say, where you have this future leader was a future leader then saying, well, this person was wearing a kanga, and that's why this was an open invitation for me to make love to her. You know, if a person makes those kinds of statements and we still think they are worthy to lead our organization, it's a strong statement. Ethics are very important in any formation, public formation, whether it's politics, sport, or anything. If you know, with all of that, with Shabir Sheikh, I'm afraid, also about 2 years earlier, having been found guilty of, bribing.
A generally corrupt relationship.
Yes, of corrupting Zuma, of giving him a bribe and all of that. That he was found guilty of that, Shabir Sheikh. So we should have known at the time that there may be problems associated with electing a person with a dagger hanging over his head. But it did not matter. We had forgotten about the moral side of public work, even of politics. Tambo used to say, the purpose of our struggle is to overthrow the racist apartheid regime and replace it with a democratic and ethical system of governance. He always added ethical. So if you throw away ethics, you'll end up with the kinds of things that are happening now. So we are reaping the consequences of our mislaying, misplacing our moral compass.
Let's leave it there for tonight. I appreciate your time and thank you very much for joining us tonight. ANC veteran Mavuso Msimang.